thank you so much. Everyone, there are chairs available in the front if you're still looking. Thank you for coming out tonight. Special thanks to the Staples Academy Foundation, the Congregational Church, and of course the Historical Society of Easton, and the Easton Cemetery Committee. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We do have the Easton Cemetery Committee outside. They're selling hats to raise funds for cemetery maintenance. The Staples Academy has a couple events coming up. We have a spaghetti dinner on November 8th and the second annual Macallan Whiskey Tasting on November 13th. So please check that out on our website and sign up for the newsletter. I don't really need to introduce Frank. I think most of you know him. He's, I can say honestly, one of my favorite people to spend time in the cemetery. Seriously. All kidding aside, he looks carefully at the monuments. He researches deeply and respectfully about the lives of the people that they represent. And for all those reasons, it's really a pleasure to have you here. So welcome, Frank Pagliaro.
Thank you. So, Easton Graveyards. In case you didn't read all the literature about what we're going to talk about next time, there's not going to be any ghosts. I don't do ghosts. You can find plenty of people that will talk about ghosts. I won't talk about ghosts. I will. Maybe I'll give you one. I'll give you one towards the end. And one trigger warning. I mean, obviously we're talking about graveyards. I'm going to talk about some things that could be a trigger for people that have suffered loss. So just be aware that that's something that comes up. Okay, next slide. All right. People, as long as they've been around, have been dying. And people have tried to figure out what to do with the bodies. Over the centuries, different things were done. A lot of people buried. In this area, the Pagussids, before Europeans arrived, were burying their dead in shallow pits with covering of stone. But really, I'm not going to be focusing on our cemeteries, which are European and Western European related. Next slide. In Easton, there are 10 places where people are memorialized by being buried or their ashes left. There's about 6,000 permanent residents of Easton in these 10 cemeteries. We're going to talk about just about 6 of them. Next slide. We're going to talk about the oldest ones. I'm making a habit not to talk about people that anybody in the room might have known. I'm getting a little squeamish about that. I'd rather talk about people that nobody's ever met, just because I can make it up as I go along. So we're going to talk about Den, Lyon, Union, Gilbert Town Center, and Aspetuck. Next slide. As I said, there's a lot of dead people in Easton. Almost as many as are above the ground right now. But these are some of the examples of the thing I was thinking of earlier about uncomfortable deaths. We have Marina Nichols died probably in childbirth in 1833, and her son died just a month later. Elizabeth and Sarah Jennings just died 3 days apart, probably of whatever illness was in their house at that time. The same as with Eliza and Alan Wilson. They died the same day. Eunice Thorpe was 1 year and 10 months. And Sterling Gilbert was 7 months, and you can see there's also an infant sleeping by the side. That indicates a child that was an infant that was born either stillborn or died even before they were able to give it a name. So they were buried with someone who's already passed away. And it's this people have this concept that in the past the life expectancy was low. You might live to be 40 years old and you were an old person. This is the reason for that. With a 25% mortality rate for infants, it drags down the average age of people. So, next slide. Right here I have half a dozen people from just Gilbert Town Cemetery who lived well into their 90s, both men and women. So, if you could make it into your teen years, you had a good chance of living to be 50, 60, 70, or 90 years old. That's just the way it worked. Next slide. But what did people die of? Well, they died of all the things that we die of now, obviously. They died of a lot of things that we hopefully don't have as often now, because we have medications, we have cures for. But they died. Childbirth was a serious condition for women. It was under the conditions of the time. The sanitary conditions prior to the 20th century were abysmal at best. So you could have dysentery, cholera, all sorts of infections, brain fever. Then there's the scarlet fever, yellow fever. Lung fever is pneumonia. Brain fever is anything. It's a catch-all. I don't know. We don't. They have no idea why this person is sick, but they're vomiting, they have fever, and they're dead. So that was brain fever. Accident. Everybody around here was on a farm. I mean, if you've ever been on a farm, you know there's machinery of all kinds around that could easily take your life. Cancer. People died of cancer then, just like people die of cancer now, and they certainly didn't have any way to treat it. Bilious fever had to do with the liver. Measles, malaria, smallpox, things that we have prevention for now. Typhoid fever. All right, so next slide. In this case here, from 1850 to 1885, the U.S. Census included a schedule of deaths in the previous, in the census year. So from June 1st, in this case, the 1870. So from June 1st, 1869 to June 1st, 1870, these are the people that died in Easton. It didn't show up as well as I hoped it would in this blurred screen. But there are 22 people on there, and I'm just going to go over my little list. I don't like using these things, but 22 people died between those two dates. 9 of them were older than 59 years old, and they died of consumption or tuberculosis. They died of lung fever, which I said was pneumonia, and cancer. 2 of them died from cancer. Between 18 and 59, there were 6 people who died. Again, tuberculosis, again, brain fever, and bilious fever. And there were 7 less than 18 years old who died of tuberculosis, lung fever, scarlet fever, and laryngitis. That's a 31% death rate for people under 17 years old, which, you know, as I said, considering the conditions, it's not surprising. On this list, just if you weren't sad enough already, brother and sister George and Agnes Godfrey, they were 9 and 7 years old, died just a few days apart of scarlet fever. And Cordelia and Fanny Gregory died 5 days apart. They were 15 and 6 years old, also of scarlet fever. So, okay, next slide. It fell to women to take care of the sick. There were doctors, but for the most part, women cared for the sick because it had to be done on a daily basis. People required attention, and women were always doing that. Next slide. And at the end, it fell to the women to take care of the dead. They would wash the dead, they would cut hair, they would trim fingernails, they would do whatever was necessary to get the body ready for burial, including early on, up until about the 1830s or so, there were shroud women. Women would get together and sew together a shroud in which to wrap the corpse. But about the 1830s, 1840s, after that, people started being buried in their own clothing. Next slide. People would dress in mourning clothes, something dark if you had it, if you didn't have black, but black obviously was the preferred thing. Women would wear a veil. I don't know if I'm blocking this side of the room. Am I doing that when I stand over here? Women would wear a black veil, especially if they went out as a sign of mourning. It was popular for a long time to give gifts, memento mori, remember you're going to die, to friends and family. That would include rings or gloves were very popular. Sometimes the rings, the jewelry would contain hairs from the deceased. At one point in the early 1700s, it got so bad, people were spending so much money on memento mori, on gloves and rings and things, that the state of Massachusetts actually passed a law and said you couldn't spend more than $500 on that kind of thing. Next slide. Oh, can you go back 1 second? Yeah, okay, go forward. Sorry. I'll make sure I miss something. The coffin. People didn't have coffins laying around. It wasn't like you went to Coffins or Us to get a new coffin. You went to the cabinet maker, and they would come in and measure out the deceased and build a coffin specifically for them. That coffin then would be delivered to the house. The body would be placed in it, and the wake would begin. The wake would last anywhere from 1 to 3 days, depending on the season and the amount of decomposition. To cover that, there would be a flower tansy, highly aromatic, would be placed in the coffin around the body, and also on the floor, so that as people are walking through the room, they're crushing tansy under their feet, and that would give, cover some of the smell that might be part of the decomposition. It also, tansy turns out to be a insect repellent, which is nice to have. People would sit with the coffin, sit with the deceased through the night, 24/7, or 24/3, 24 hours a day. Not because they were afraid the person wasn't dead and they were going to wake up in the middle of the night. It was out of respect. They felt that nobody should be left alone as they were going to the great unknown. The house would be festooned with, festooned is not exactly the right word, but be decorated, not even a good word either, with black bunting. The mirrors would be covered, similar to Jewish tradition, and people would come by and visit. Next slide. When the day came to go down to the graveyard or the cemetery, in larger towns there might be like a procession. Let's go over on this side for a second. So this would be like New Haven or Hartford or something. You'd have fancy dressed people. There would be the nomenclature. We have pallbearers, right? You go to a funeral, there's people holding the casket. We call them pallbearers, but they're not really pallbearers. They're beer bearers. They're carrying the coffin on something, a beer. The pallbearers are actually carrying this large curtain over the top of the coffin. That's the pall. Anyway, that wouldn't have happened around here. In fact, even probably a hearse until the later part of the 19th century probably wouldn't have been part of the trip to the cemetery. A bier would have been. There would have been something you could just put the coffin on and walk down to the cemetery. And when you got down there, someone, very early on, someone in the family or a friend would have dug a grave. Later on, the sexton would do that, or professional grave diggers would do that. But in a small town, people would bury, and you would bury wherever you could. We'll get to that in a few minutes. Next slide. Further memento mori. Afterwards, you would have cut some of the hair off the deceased, and you could use it in these embroideries. So there's hair interwoven in these pictures of mourning with weeping willows and urns and tablets explaining the person's name. But these are actually woven hair in designs. And finally, in the at the beginning of photography, people generally didn't get their photos taken. So it meant be the only chance to have your photo taken was as a deceased person in the coffin. And so that was popular to take pictures of the dead. There's a lot of pictures out there, if you go online, of people surrounding somebody who looks like they're dead, but they're probably just asleep. Everybody thinks every picture from the mid-19th century is of somebody dead, but it's not. They just look like that. Next slide. At the cemetery, up until really the 20th century, or even actually the mid-19th century, people were generally buried facing east. So this is Gilbertown. The shadows you can see from the tombstones. The sun is setting. I can tell the sun is setting because this is the west, and all the tombstones are facing east. Next slide. So if you're here in Gilbertown, you're looking east, and you can see the entablature. You can see the front of the tombstones in all of these. Next slide. The front of the tombstone is here, the headstone, and the footstone is at the back. The body is buried in between. Unlike the way we bury people now, if you're looking at the inscription, the body would be buried here in a modern cemetery. Back then, there was a headstone and a footstone, and there's a reason for this. This is, you're looking east. This is the headstone, the footstone, the body's here, the head is here. Come the judgment day, when Jesus returns, you would rise up towards the rising sun and towards where he was coming from. So everybody be facing the right way at the right time. Next slide. Okay, so we actually came to talk about graveyards or cemeteries. Next slide. As I said, this is Gildertown. This is 58. Next slide. It's about 335 people. Well, okay. You should see this. I said earlier there are 6,000 people, I should say, memorialized here in Easton. There's a countless number of people that were buried who don't have a marker, that have been buried, that were buried with nothing, or have been lost to time. So right now there are about, I think there are 333 markers in Gildertown, but there's probably many more people buried there, and I'll talk about that in a second. I say graveyards because it's such a much cooler word than cemetery. Cemetery means sleeping place in Latin. Graveyards are associated, the nomenclature is graveyards are associated with a church. It's like churchyard. Around here, in Catholic and Anglican tradition, the prayers of the faithful in church would help the people who were lying in the graveyards outside achieve heaven. In the Puritan belief, there's predestination. So there are a set number of people that are going to go to heaven, and nothing's going to help the rest of you. So there was really no need to have people have a graveyard right next to thank you, Jonathan. There's no reason to have a graveyard right next to the church. But this is the Episcopal Church up in Rome. Next slide. Something about gravestones. The first settlers, even here probably, but certainly down in Fairfield when it was originally settled, when people died, they were buried in the ground. There was the materials and the craftsmen to make these tombstones didn't exist. So people were buried with a field stone in which there maybe had been chiseled initials to indicate who they were, or with a wooden, some wooden symbol, a cross or whatever, which would then disappear over time, just like the field stones. But eventually, the proper source for slate and sandstone, schist, and a little bit were found, and craftsmen who could actually carve them came to the country. And certainly around here, there were people that knew how to do that. Just a quick thing here. It's just so you understand something about that. The top decorative section is called a tympanum. These shoulder pieces that are decorated are called finials, and then the inscription area is a tablet. And over time, originally the symbolism on the top of the tympanum was dark and death. You're going to die. Think about that. So it's a skeleton type head. But over time, feelings softened, the first Great Awakening, the second Great Awakening. People wanted to think that there was that going to that other life was going to be better. And so we had an angel style face. And then at one point we even did this cherub look, which is again softened. We don't have any examples prior to this style, but some of them were really dark. I mean, skeletons and bat wings and things. Next slide. Okay, so Major Jabez Hill was a hero of the Revolution. He fought at the Battle of Ridgefield. He was a cavalry officer. This is the route that General Tryon's troops took in April of 1777 to destroy the military supplies at Danbury, and then on their way back fought a battle at Ridgefield and kicked their ass all the way down the westward. Based on his probate records that I found, I believe he lived in this area. This is Black Rock Turnpike, and this is Westport Road. The cemetery is actually right over there. He may have actually lived in this house that eventually became Moses Ogden's house. This is Jabez Hill's signature from his last will and testament. Next slide. Oh, by the way, he died in 1779 as a young man. He was, I think, 37 years old. These are some of the other Revolutionary War people in Gilbertown. There are quite a few people that served in some capacity during the Revolutionary War buried in Easton, or lived in Easton at some point. So this is just a small number of them. And these all served on the Patriot side. Next slide. But there were also people who were on the Tory side, people that were loyal to the king, generally Anglicans. The king was the head of the church. It made sense for them to stick with that. This is, I put these two stones, this one stone in here. This picture is only a couple of years ago, and this was just a few months ago. How much deterioration has taken place on this sandstone. It's a problem with sandstones is that water gets in between the different layers of the stone and then thaws, freezes, and it breaks off like that. And this is the kind of thing on the cemetery committee we want to put a stop to, or at least do the best we can. Next slide. Moses Burr, speaking of Tory Burr, the story in Easton, its history, Francis Mellon and Helen Partridge, is that Moses Burr invited General Tryon on his way to Danbury to breakfast after they got up at whatever time early in the morning to march on Danbury and burn the supplies there. Dan Cruzon pointed out that it was very unlikely that 700 British soldiers would stop for lunch or breakfast deep in enemy territory. But I always say there's a grain of truth in every historical, every story that people tell from the past. So who knows what that little kernel is? But anyway, Moses Burr lived at the top of Freeborn and Norton in this house. And he lived to a ripe old age, or 85, 1825, and apparently at Tory Burr, nobody seemed to care. He's got along fine with his neighbors. He stayed in town. Next slide. The Williams family. So this is Gilbertown Cemetery, right? The name Gilbertown comes from the fact that many Gilberts settled in this area early on. Almost all of the maps that I'm circling on is the 1867 Beers map. By 1867, there's almost no Gilberts to be found anywhere. But there's a lot of Williamses right here by the cemetery. And they're from the Gilbertown from the early 1800s to the mid 1800s. And there's just as many of them across the street in Center. We'll talk about them in a minute too. Okay, so next slide. Reverend Alvin Barlow Jennings. Unusual in Gilbertown. Gilbertown has really stopped burying people about the middle of the late 19th century. The reason for that is, and this is Herbert Hines, Reverend Herbert Hines, who was a minister here, reported that when the sexton would go to dig a grave in Gilbertown where he didn't think there was anybody buried, he would find them 3 deep. And this goes towards what I was saying, that not everybody marked their graves off or were able to. Anyway, so almost all of the stones are very old, and in fact they are all very old, except for Alvin Barlow Jennings and his brother's obelisk, which is, I don't have a picture of here, but it's right here in the cemetery. Alvin and his wife Carrie died in the 20th century, and they were buried by their family in Gilbertown, where the rest of the family is also buried. Many of them buried in that section. He was born at the lower end of Wilson, where Beers cuts across. That farmhouse is long gone now. You can still see her name on here. He spent most of his time, he went to Yale for divinity, and he was in the Berkshires for a short time, but spent most of his career in Colorado and Los Angeles. But he died in Atlantic City, and nobody said why he died, which I would love to know what he was doing in Atlantic City. Anyway, I'm sure it was ministerial. Next slide. Oh, wait, go back. I left this up here. I'm trying to cut down the number of slides and how long I talk. It's also, this is the only granite tombstone in Gilbertown. I mentioned the other tombstones being sandstone and slate and schist. There's one schist in there. But this is the only granite one. Granite became a popular tombstone material at the end of the 19th century and going forward because of mechanized machinery. It's very hard to work, whereas slate and sandstone is very easy, and marble is very easy to work. Granite was not easy to work, and it wasn't until they had machinery that could carve it. And in this case, this is really an astounding carving. I don't know if you can really see, but this is actually a scroll that goes like that. So that's pretty cool. Next slide. Sarah Thorpe Diamond Jennings. Sarah Thorpe married John Diamond. They had 2 children. John died before his 30th birthday in 1793. Sarah Thorpe Diamond then married Sylvanus Jennings. He lived to be 54. She outlived him by about 20 years. She died in 1838. Apparently illiterate. This is her mark on her last will and testament. But what I found interesting here is that both her husbands are on this one stone. And I do not know if either or both of them are actually buried there. But the fact that both of them are marked on there. Now the interesting thing about this also is that John Diamond John Diamond and Sarah Thorpe Diamond are the mother and father of Elizabeth Diamond, who married Alja Bradley, who became the owners of the Bradley Hubble House. So next slide. And we'll come back to that too. Marble. So about the beginning of the 19th century and well into the 1900s, marble was a very popular. There was a vein of marble was found, I believe, in Litchfield and obviously Vermont, but certainly in Litchfield there was a source for marble, and it's incredibly easy to carve and shows up really well in its carvings at first, but over time, the weather, acid rain, pollution does its damage, and a lot of these are very hard to read. These tiny written inscriptions that were written 200 years ago are almost impossible to read. In this case, also the iconography changed during this time period. We have weeping willows and urns going through this time period. And tablature is this nice oval with in the memory of with the name and dates. This is Abram Bradley. His first wife died 10 years before he did. His second wife died just a month after he did, and they're all buried at the exact same type of stone in this row. Next slide. So these are some of the things that are legible on the tombstones. They tend to be religious in sentiment. He giveth his beloved sleep. In my Father's house are many mansions. Be ye also ready. Therefore, be ye also ready. For in such an hour as you think not, the Son of Man cometh. There's also this one, which is for a child. Mourn not for me, my friends so dear, nor weep around my tomb. My little spirit is not here, for Jesus called it home. So those are the kinds of things that people wanted to put on their stones when they could, because it was possible to carve those kinds of things on marble, but it was not possible on the other stones. Next slide. The Perrys. Perrys are one in a long line of millers. When Easton was first settled, one of the first things they had to do was build a mill. And this was one of the first mills. This is the Aspetuck River, this is Westport Road, and this is Reading Road, Old Reading Road coming up in here, Reading Road off that way. And a mill was built there, Moses Diamond. And a succession of mills were on at that point. And at one point, the Perrys were there. They lived in the house that's now, well, as the Gus Pfeiffer, you probably know that house, on the corner here of Old Reading Road and Westport Road. This is one of the mills. You probably recognize the quote-unquote toy mill. This is on the location of where the mills were, more or less. Two things. Orlando Perry was one of the people that died of cancer in that 1870 census. He lived across the street from that house here. It says operation for cancer, which says that the operation did not go well. But Sarah Perry, Joe Perry left the Congregational Church in 1814. His wife Sarah, this is from the church records. Thank you, Jonathan. November 3rd, 1838. Whereas Mrs. Sarah Perry, a member of this congregation for a long season, withdrawn from our worship, communion, and fellowship, and whereas said conduct is disorderly and a breach of her covenant vows and obligations, and whereas she has failed to give satisfaction to the church for said conduct, but still persists in the same, therefore voted that we, as a Church of Christ, withdraw from her and declare her to be no longer a member of the visible Church of Christ, according to 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 6, Charles Prentice, pastor. So she got kicked out for not showing up. It is important to show up to meetings, to town meetings, and to church meetings. And if you didn't, you could get kicked out. Interestingly, at this time, a lot of people were leaving the Congregational Church to go to the Methodist Church and the Baptist Church, but that's for a topic for a whole other story. And everybody here knows 2 Thessalonians 3:6, right? So I think you quote that. Now we command you, brethren, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that you withdraw yourselves from every brother that has walked disorderly, and not after the tradition which he received of us. So she got kicked out and got, verbally spanked for it as well. Anyway, next one. Betsy Ann Wakeman has a special place in my heart. When we moved here 30 years ago, in my backyard was this tombstone. Yeah, right? I'm like, no. I mean, I knew I lived, I didn't know right away, but I knew I lived on old Wakeman land. But I didn't think that this one tombstone was going to be buried. People were buried. There's, in fact, we're not going to talk about them. There's two people buried up on Judd Road, I think, on farmland, on private property. And there's one, I think, right, Joan, down in Delaware, off Delaware, across from Dallas, she said. Right, Joan? Joan's not listening. Anybody else? Anyway, so anyway, this tombstone was in my yard, and I'm like, that can't be. So I called up the Historical Society, and I said, I have a tombstone, and somebody came and picked it up, and they threw it in the back of their big old Cadillac, and they drove off with it, and I'm like, yay, I did the right thing. So about 15 years later, 10 years later, when I was a board member on the Historical Society, I was, like I always do, rooting around in the closet under some boxes, and there's this big slab of, and so I'm like, what the heck is that? And it was flat face down. They're heavy. If you've ever not lifted one, I'll tell you they're heavy. I lifted it up, and I'm like, oh my God, it's Betsy Ann. So I said, did anybody know why? They said, no, it was there when we added this thing onto the library, and we didn't know what to do with it, so we put that in there. I'm like, okay. So, to her credit, Lisa Burkhardt, I believe she was president of the society at the time, she did a lot of work, and she was on the original cemetery committee too, so she did a lot of work to track down Betsy Ann. And you can read it. It says, in memory of Betsy Ann, daughter of Eliphalet and Eunice Wakeman, niece of Elizabeth Wakeman, who died May 25th, 1832, aged 25 years. We don't know the whole story, but what I do know is that Betsy Ann's parents, Eliphalet and Eunice, moved to Walton, New York, around 1800 or so. They're in the census up there. A lot of people moved away from Easton in the early 19th century. After the Revolutionary War, the West opened up. The Firelands, the North, in Ohio, people were moving out there. The land. Have you ever been to the southern tier of upstate New York? The soil is black. You could grow. Bury That's how fertile the soil is. And so people were moving from places where every time you stuck a spade in the ground, it hit a rock, to a place like that. So that's probably why they moved. And Elizabeth, her aunt, lived in Greenfield Hill. And they must have been very close for her to be included on the tombstone. And for whatever reason, Betsy Ann was here, probably visiting Elizabeth, and died of whatever when she was just 25 years old. And so, yeah, there you go. Next slide.
What happened to the tombstone then?
Oh, did you want to know? Now people care. Yeah, they didn't care what was lying in the closet. Yeah, so like I said, Elizabeth did all this. Lisa, sorry Elizabeth, you're on my mind. Lisa Burkhardt did all this work, and they didn't know where to put it, because like I said, there's graves everywhere that we don't have tombstones for. But she did her best, and they put it in the northeast corner of Gilbert Cemetery. So it's there amongst some other vagrants, so she's not by herself.
And you don't know why it was on your property.
I have a story. You know that story? The people that owned my house, their kids are, no, their kids, the kids are my age. One of them was working for the town when he was in his teens, and they were cleaning up the graveyards, I guess. And he came across this laying in a place that it shouldn't have been, like outside. He said outside the graveyard, and so he's like, well, I don't know where it goes, so it'd be kind of cool to have. They brought it home, and that's where it stayed for the next. Well, I bought the house in '95, and they lived there. They were there before me. Maybe he could have been, well, 17. When I was 17 in 1975. So there you go. Do the math. 20 years it was in my backyard. It was just leaning up against the fence. I mean, that was my first clue. It was leaning against the fence. It's like, it's leaning against the fence, it means it hasn't been standing. It wasn't in the ground. All right, next slide. Not enough about Betsy Ann. Nathan Wheeler. Nathan Wheeler was the first clerk of the town of Weston in 1787. He was the kind of town clerk for, I don't know, 25 to 30 years. He lived in the house across from Greiser's, pointing, where am I going? That way! I'm pointing that way. I work at Greiser's now. I love the fact that I'm there. Anyway, he lived in that house, and he was when the Weston meteorite exploded over New Milford, and the pieces landed in what's now Easton. At the time it was Weston, that's why it's called the Weston meteorite. That's a whole other thing. If you ever have 2 hours, I can tell you. When Benjamin Silman came from Yale College to interview people about the fall of the meteorite, he said that Nathan Wheeler, and I'll just quote him actually, a gentleman of great respectability and of undoubted veracity. He gave a great description of what he saw. He was walking out between his house and the barn at 6 o'clock in the morning, and suddenly the sky lit up. Again, I don't want to go through the whole story, but he did such a great job describing it that it takes up like the first 2 pages of the account of the meteor. He's buried in Gilbert Town as well. Next slide. No, okay. And I don't even know if I have to say anything. Does anybody not know Samuel Staples? Okay, moving right along. Samuel Staples, this tombstone, it's in immaculate condition, and Jonathan made an excellent point. People have probably, because of how important he is to the town, people have been taking really good care of it, and maybe enhancing it in some way. The hats that Deirdre's out there pushing, shameless commerce. This on here is from Samuel Staples' tombstone. His house was on Wilson Road. Still standing, and of course, he gave the money for this building and for the church and where it's located. Every time I walk into the cemetery, I cross my heart that nothing happened to this. Next one. Center Street, across the street. Okay, 1860. So as I said, Gilbert was filling up faster than people even had any idea. So it was time to open another cemetery. So they went across the street to Center. Next slide. And again, we're looking east, and you can see this carriageway here, and there's a carriageway over there, but and let's show you overhead, next slide. Oh, it's okay. So, cemeteries really weren't really well taken care of, even from day one. I mean, it's work, right? Somebody's got to go in there and cut the grass and everything, and the people are dead. Nobody's going to complain. So generally nothing really happened there. Many times they were enclosed, and being enclosed made it possible to make use of that space, because you don't really want to waste any land that you've cleared. And so small animals like sheep or calves could be corralled within the cemetery for two purposes. One, they'd be fed. Two, they'd keep all the grass down. So that was a thing that would happen. But again, next slide. So, but here's Center Street Cemetery. And Center Street falls under a new category. This is the middle of the 19th century. And at this time, around the 1840s, 1850s, the rural cemetery concept was being proposed. That instead of having this random churchyard full of stones memorializing dead people where nobody ever went, let's make the cemetery, and now we're going to talk about cemeteries because we want it to be more engaging. Let's make the cemeteries a place people want to go to. And so they were going to be designed, people started designing them, so that they were, people would want to go. They made carriageways and paths and grassy areas and knolls and all sorts of things. Now, Center Street is not that much, but it is laid out. There are these two carriageways that go straight back to here and around the Wakeman Monument, and all the plots were sold in 16 by 16 foot lots, which you could bury, I guess, you could probably bury about 10 people in the 16 by 16, in one layer, and then go down, obviously. So it's laid out a little better. Next slide. This is Mountain Grove Cemetery in Bridgeport, and you all may know or not know that we have an annex of Mountain Grove over on the other side of Easton. But Mountain Grove was established in the 1849, 1850s. P.T. Barnum, here's his tombstone, here's his monument over here, helped establish that, and that is in the rural style. There's a fountain, there's lakes, there's hills, and the stones. This is the Warner Brothers, not Warner Brothers cartoons, but Warner Brothers, the corset manufacturers. This is their monument. This is the Civil War section. Just these amazing monuments, because it was a place to go. It was like an outdoor museum. This one monument here, and we're going to talk about this in a second as well. This is a white bronze monument. It's made out of zinc, and I just happened to be looking at it because it was so cool. And down at the bottom, right over here, it says Emily Burton, wife of Ezra Silliman, here, died July 11th, 1838, age 31 years, 10 months, buried at Easton, Connecticut. So they must have been living in Easton at the time that his first wife died, and she's actually buried over there in Gilbert. Next slide. With the change in the 1860s, there was also a change in the style of the tombstones. They were a little softer, it's a rounded shape, a little less decoration on the face, but also some more decoration on the top. So a dove and a crown with a cross in it. Next slide. The Bradley family. So you all know the Bradley family from Bradley Hubble House. This is when the tree was a baby, and now the tree is gone. But this is Alja and Elizabeth Bradley. All the Bradleys are buried here, except for one. Even the ones that got married, and not many of them did, the women that got married, are also buried nearby with their husbands. And obviously the Bradleys lived in the Bradley Hubble House on Black Rock Turnpike. But all their tombstones are the same. There are footstones behind them. Next slide. This is again that same picture. And as I said, so Alja and Elizabeth are buried there, and then all these children, and then John Diamond Bradley, who lived in Fairfield, was actually buried in Oak Lawn Cemetery, which interestingly is a rural type cemetery. with that. Levi and Mary died 3 days apart, and their brother John Diamond died a week later. It was kind of sad that all three of them died in that short time period. Levi Wakeman Bradley was the second use of Levi in the family. The first Levi lived only about a year, exactly, 1 year and 6 months, a year and a half. He died, and they reused his name, which is not unusual. If people wanted to honor somebody and they lost the first baby, for whatever, that name could be reused, and it was. Next slide. Charles Rowell lived at the top of Freeborn and Norton. I don't know, maybe somebody who knows better than me, but this is Rowell, this is Wells Hill. I'm thinking that the row somewhere got lost, and so it was actually Rowell's Hill at one point. Anyway, they lived in this house that was, and this is my other job, and I'm not doing the cemetery thing, I'm on the Historic Preservation Committee. This house was torn down in 2016 before there was a Preservation Committee. If there had been, we might have had a chance to at least extract some of the important details, or maybe hopefully convince people not to tear down the house, but we can't stop anybody. Anyway, this is their monument. This is Charles's side. This is Elizabeth, and then their son Charles H. Died only 22 years old, which is sad. But I also put two interesting stories to bring to life. Actually, I'm wearing this shirt. I got to show you this. I'm not getting a dress. This is my shirt. You can all read it. It says "Bringing History Back from the Dead," and that's really I don't know if I even said this at the very beginning. The most important thing I want you to walk away from here is that these were your neighbors. That all these people that I'm talking about lived up here with us. At one point, well, not with us, but would have lived. You would have known them. You would have. And in this case, there's a story that from the Newtown Bee about that a bunch of serenaders came to the Rowell's house, bringing many instruments, and they were treated very happily by the happy couple. And then also, thieves stole a bag of grain and oranges from Charles Rowell's barn last week. And, a bag of grain and oranges is a strange thing to take, but people had regular lives. I was just talking to a reporter. It's like they woke up in the morning, they went to work, they had breakfast, they had families, they had children. They loved people, they hated people. They lived, they died, obviously. They got sick. They looked just like us, just in a slightly different way, and much longer time ago. So anyway, next slide. The Daniel Parrick and Eliza Parrick lived in this house just below the Bradley Hubble House on Black Rock Turnpike. Daniel's father was Dr. Uriah Parrick. He's buried in Gilbertown with his wife, Deborah. This is an interesting article from the Newtown Bee. It's retracting a previous article in which they had mentioned that George Parrick had died. That's Daniel's son, when it was actually Daniel who had died. So they were sorry about that. This is a white bronze monument. Okay, this is the only one on the west side of town. There is a half a dozen of them in Union. Next slide. The white bronze zinc, or white bronze, it's actually zinc. White bronze is a fancy name because nobody, but the Bridgeport Monumental Bronze Company could produce for you a beautiful monument to your order. There is no showroom. They had salesmen that came around with catalogs. Like, you picked out what you liked. And not only did you pick out just, say, a monument like this, you could pick out just this part of it. Or you could put this part with that part. You could mix and match it any way, because when you picked out what you wanted, they would send the order originally to Bridgeport, Barnum Avenue now. It's long gone. It's actually where if you know where what's the color blends, where the color blends people are, that was across the street from there. They would send it off, and they would manufacture, they would put together this monument. And these are the actual catalog pictures and the monuments that we have in Union Cemetery, and I couldn't find one that were like in Center. But yeah, you ordered your parts, and eventually they had a couple of factories, I think one in Chicago and one in Pittsburgh. But yeah, you ordered your monument and they shipped it to you. And the idea behind the zinc white bronze was that it would last forever. And it probably would have lasted forever, except they're really, really heavy. And after a while, the metal sags on the big monuments. These small ones will last forever. And the granite people didn't care for that idea. They thought, this is terrible, and they did everything they could to badmouth the zinc. But what eventually killed the company, it really didn't end in 1914. They still produced things into the 1930s, but really killed the company around 1914. Was World War I. The country needed metal, and this was the metal that they wanted, and so they no longer had access to their product. Anyway, next slide. The hills, I cannot find that Wakeman Hill and Edward Hill were related in any way. It just happened to be the Hill family. Edward Hill was the first town clerk of the town of Easton. And he lived in the house that just changed hands on the corner of Adams and North Park. And Wakeman Hill lived, this is across the street from the other houses. This is Westport Road and Black Rock Turnpike here. One of his sons, Seth, was a doctor. They both had these tall monuments. I think of them as the competing hill monuments. One of Wakeman's sons, Lloyd Hill, died in Phoenix, Arizona Territory, before it's a state. He was a saloon owner, which I think was kind of cool, right? His saloon was clean and quiet, and none but the best liquors and cigars kept at the bar. Great to know. He died on the Gila River in Maricopa County. I don't know how. He was age 48. I can only imagine the boat flipped over for whatever reason. But there he died. Next slide. Go back for a second. Just throw this out here. So, in case any of you want to, do the crossword puzzle, I'm a taphophile. A taph is Latin for grave. I love graves. This is a cenotaph for Lloyd Hill. Cento means empty grave. So Lloyd Hill is not buried here. He's buried out in Arizona somewhere. So those are just, cenotaph and taphophile, just in case you want. There's also taphophilia, just, you know what that means, right? Okay, next slide. You wouldn't be here if you were taphophilia. Taphophilia? Anyway, Gershom Bradley. Gershom Bradley was a manufacturer of edge tools, of things like axes. He lived in Easton for a while, but then moved to where his factory was. This is the Saugatuck River, and his house is here. The factory was here. Here's a picture of the factory down here. Burned down a long time ago. And he's buried in Center Street Cemetery. Once again, reminding you that times could be really tough back then. Didn't have OSHA and didn't have unions. Henry Robinson lost an arm in Bradley's tool factory, getting it caught between a pair of steam shears. Yeah. William Abbott was killed instantly by the bursting of a grindstone on the 12th in Bradley's tool factory. He leaves a wife and 4 children. I couldn't find a tombstone for William Abbott, which, again, is not unusual. Okay, next slide. Civil War veterans, there are several in Union, here in Center. None that I'm aware of. I think all the tombstones in Gilbert predate the Civil War. These are some of the Civil War veterans. These are the free tombstones that you could get as a veteran. These are not, they died at well advanced ages, 92 here, 77, well 69 that old I guess, I'm 67, so 69 is that old. Seth Robertson, he's on this tombstone, he's not buried here. He he died at Vicksburg in 1862. And I was like, oh, wow, he died at the Battle of Vicksburg. And I'm like, I looked that up. The Battle of Vicksburg was 1863. In 1862, the Union Army was sitting around Vicksburg sieging, and the weather was really, really hot, and the flies and the mosquitoes and everything else. There was nothing but disease, and he evidently died of disease, waiting to engage in combat. Next slide. Wakeman, Samuel Wakeman. I include him first of all because I know where his house is on Black Rock Turnpike, just across from Freeborn. And he has this the family has this enormous monument. Also, Samuel Wakeman, this again is a cenotaph for Samuel, I believe, I can't be sure, because there are markers that say, it's SW, there's markers. He may have been exhumed from Gilbert and moved here, but they may not have, because he died in 1809. But he was one of the enslavers that lived in Easton. And on this 1790 census, it shows that he had 3 people that he enslaved. I know that he manumitted Jack and Phyllis in 1797, and so I can only hope that he also manumitted the others. Probably part of the manumission process that the state of Connecticut developed. That I forget exact rules, but a slave born after this date, when reaching age 25, had to be whatever. So anyway, I included it for that. Next slide. Okay, so the Williams family. So we talked about the Williams family a long time ago in Gilbertown. I also said there was a bunch of them buried over here in Center. They lived in this house that stood in Aspetuck Park behind the Bluebird, which is long gone. This is the picture of the house too. Abigail's husband, Nathan, died when he was just 36 years old in 1854. And within 10 years or 9 years, 4 of her 7 children died as well. So she lost her husband and 4 of her 7 children within 10 years. She also outlived 2 of her adult children, and was only outlived by Sarah Freeborn by only 4 years. Abigail lived from 1820 to 1900. It's a monumentally sad story. But this is the heirs of Nathan Williams' house. That was probably that house. Next slide. Pottersfield. As I said, there's a lot of people that are buried that we don't know, and Pottersfield is one of those places for sure. In 2007, ground penetrating radar was done in the cemetery in this area, and this is the results. It shows about a dozen graves or possible graves in here. But also, I know the town of Easton purchased a number of plots in the northeast corner of the cemetery, and the ground penetrating radar showed that there are probably about 40 graves, unmarked graves in there. So these are all unmarked. This is the way we have this this northwest section of the cemetery set up. There's a plaque that explains what this plot of land is for the final resting place. There's a little bench where you can sit. This gate, come all the way over here. This gate is one of the 2 gates that originally was the entrance here. The other side is lost, or whichever side it was, the other side is lost. And Gary Haynes, who's done remarkable work for us for years in the cemetery committee, took this home, cleaned up the gate, straightened it all out, and got 2 granite posts and set the granite posts so that that fence gate is now part of the decoration here. We have plans to spruce this up and maybe make it even more attractive to sit in. The reason for it's called Potter's Field, it's a biblical reference. When Judas turned in Jesus for 30 pieces of gold, he realized what a horrible thing he'd done, and so he gave the money back and killed himself, hanged himself. The people who got the 30 silver pieces back said, this is blood money, we can't use this for anything. So what they did was they bought land that clay potters had used, land that was mostly clay, you couldn't grow anything in it. They bought that land, and that's where they buried indigent people and criminals and people who had nobody to take care of them. And so that's why it's called Potter's Field, or the very thing. Next slide. Aspetuck Cemetery. Next slide. 1891. Laid out very carefully. This cemetery is still active. So, like I said, I'm going to talk about people that you might have known, hopefully. Nobody's here is like 125 years old, right? Okay. Next slide. Moses Ogden he says, enclosed a piece of land south of the new cemetery, which was center, and will lay it out in burial lots. And that's what he did, and that's where he got buried. So this is Moses Ogden's stone. This is actually, this line of trees is the marking spot between Center Street and Aspetuck. And this house here on the corner of Black Rock and Westport Road, this is Moses Ogden's house. This would be essentially where that turnaround is, where people always get out of the car and throw all their crap out, you know, because why you couldn't take it home, right? You got to throw it out on Easton. But that's where, it says here that when he died, he was 96 years old. He was the second oldest person in Easton and the oldest man. So keep that in mind. It's going to be a test there. Next slide. Charles Jennings lived off of, right across from Union Cemetery on Sport Hill and Stepney Road. He had a patent for an improved horse rake. In case you don't know what a horse rake is, it is a rake pulled by a horse. What it does is after you cut your hay or whatever, you have the horse drag this along and it bundles it all up in there. His factory was here, the horse rake factory. This is the mill dam was behind here. It's now broken through, so it runs, but the factory was right here. This is some of the foundation wall of the factory. And he lived right next door to it. And he's buried in Aspetuck. Next slide. Another manufacturer, David Gould, the second to last in a long line of millers at that spot on the Aspetuck River where Old Reading Road and Westport Road is. David Gould is buried in Aspetuck. His son Franklin was a miller there. He died young as well. He was just 35 years old. Next slide. Lion Cemetery. 1800, it's a family cemetery. Next slide. This is, again, looking east. This is Sport Hill Road, so this is Upper Sport Hill Road, just below Rock House. It's a very small cemetery, probably 40 or 50 stones there. We don't know how many burials. See this little indentation here in the ground? That's kind of a drainage area. One of the Lyon family members, who's still alive, thinks that there might be people buried close to the road. Not unlikely, only because when when this was built and being filled, the roads were only as wide as a cart, really, and obviously for two cars to pass with a shoulder, the road is considerably wider. But without GPR, we won't really know. So we're going to do that. Next slide. So this is the way it's laid out. It's just very small. Next slide. So, as I said, it's a family burial spot. So there's all sorts of Lyon family and the in-laws, the Bradleys, Hollies, Hulls, Platts, and Todds, and they're all buried there too, which is kind of nice. Next slide. The Lyon family lived on around Reading Road, Rock House Road, and Sport Hill, and this is the 1856 map, the Clark map, but you can see there's 4 Lyons here, but some of these other houses probably were owned by Lyons or built by Lyons. There were many more of them here, especially judging by this graveyard. Next slide. The Lyons were, for the most part, Tories. There was no love lost between them and the Patriots fighting during the Revolution. Next slide. These 4 men were members of the Reading Loyalist Association, Ebenezer, Thomas, Gershom, and Daniel. Gershom is the great-grandfather to Elias Levy Lyon. Next slide. Elias Levy Lyon joined the Union Army as soon as he possibly could. He was born, and his father died when he was only 4 years old, I believe. Orville Lyon was his father. His mother, Chloe Ann, married George Platt after that. He was 18 years old, I believe. Elias joined the Union Army, and he fought at the Battle of, well, it's kind of hard to say he actually fought at the Battle of Cedar Creek. It was the beginning of it was a rout. The Confederates surprised the Union Army and took about 1,000 prisoners, I guess. It then turned around and the Union fought off the Confederate, but not before they lost all these people. They were taken to Salisbury Prison in North Carolina. So they went from Virginia to North Carolina. They did not go by train. They walked. And Salisbury was not set up to be a prison. It was set up for another purpose entirely for the Confederates. But as the war progressed and the Confederacy had more prisoners, they turned it into a prison. Originally made for 300 people. Eventually there was thousands and thousands of people. And we were talking about earlier about sanitary conditions in general in the 19th century. Thousands and thousands of men with very little food because the Confederacy was losing the war at this point in 1864, and sanitary conditions, abysmal sanitary conditions. It's now a national park, national cemetery as well, and people died, they were just thrown into trenches. So unmarked graves, trench burials. The marker says there that in 18 trenches just south of the spot rest the bodies of 11,700 soldiers of the United States Army. Some research lately suggests it may be closer to 4,000 people. It may be overstated, but that's a lot of people to be buried. Again, Lisa Burkhart, sing her praises. She heard about Elias, and she, obviously there was no way we were going to find the body, but she wanted some recognition in line for him. And so she got, again, one of the 3 tombstones available for veterans, and had it placed in Lyon Cemetery. And we had I don't even know how long ago it was, 12, 14 years ago. We had this whole ceremony, released the dove, I sang Amazing Grace, and it was really quite beautiful. So despite his great-grandfather being a Tory, he gave his life for the Union. Next slide. Union Cemetery. We're getting towards the end. Don't run out. Union Cemetery. Well, remember we talked about no cemeteries were built near churches. Well, but what about the Baptist Church? Well, the Baptist churches came 50 years after Union Cemetery was started. Union was out here in 1760. The oldest part is the next slide. Yeah, the oldest part of the cemetery is up here in the north part, and then as you move down this way and this way, it all gets newer. So most of the modern burials are along this way. This is Stephanie Road and Sword Hill. Okay, next slide. So because of that, the kinds of tombstones in Union vary immensely. I talked about field stones. So there are some that may be markers. There are field stones. There are very early slate stones. This rather elaborate red sandstone. This one with the same type of decoration that Samuel Staples has. There must have been some local carver that did these. This one as well, I think I showed you a picture of that, that's also reproduced. And some of the stones are broken that may have been legible at some time and have been broken over time. And there's the white bronze monuments. Next slide. It needs no introduction. You all know the first minister of the Congregational Church in North Fairfield. That's Reverend James Johnson. He's buried there. He lived, you should all know this too, where he lived at where Center Road and Adams Road meet across from the street there. And should I point to where the Congregational Church is? I don't need to do that, right? And that's his house. I love this picture here because it's before some of the changes. So here's the salt box, and that's before. But you can still stand in the street there and look at the house. A 250 plus year old house. that the Reverend Johnson came to, every day and left from every day. That's what I said, I see dead people. I do. I walk around town and I don't just see what was here now. I try to see what was there. Next time. The meteorite, back to the meteorite, the Western meteorite. A number of the people that were witnesses or that actually picked up pieces of the meteorite are buried in Union Cemetery. Gideon Hall on Sport Hill Road, across from Payne Open Space. He's from there. William Prince lived on Andrews Road, the David Sherwood house, but it burned down, I think, in the 60s. And Elijah and Patience Seeley, two of my favorite people, they live down at the bottom of Morehouse. Not the Morehouse that you're used to driving down to Congress Street on, but if you just keep going down Morehouse and then you come to houses now, the road continued, and then if you're driving on Congress, look, there's like a snake thing down to Congress. That's where this, you can actually see it here. That's a little snake thing dropping down at the Congress Street. But they all picked up pieces of the meteorite. Elijah and Patience had the biggest. They had a bushel worth of meteorite. Next slide. Interesting thing about Union Cemetery is that it spans 4 centuries, 1760 to today. And so it was there for the Revolutionary War, and it's been there through modern wars, and it was there for the Civil War. Next slide. During the Civil War, now I mentioned that earlier that women took care of the bodies for burial. There was no embalming. That's why I talked about decomposition, why we had Tansy, why they did everything they could to get the body in the ground as soon as possible. But during the Civil War, so many men died. And so many families didn't want their sons buried in some distant battlefield. I mean, traditionally, a war was fought, whoever fell was buried where they fell, and that was the end of it. Families wanted their children back. And so the bombing, which is in its infant stage, really took off. And so there were traveling embalmers who followed the army around, and after battles, found out which soldiers were fit to be sent back to their families, and so that's when, interestingly, when women stepped or were pushed, I shouldn't say stepped, were pushed out of the picture of the body, taking care of dead bodies, and funeral homes and embalmers and morticians actually took place, and so men took over that job. The selling point, I describe this. When Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, his body was embalmed, and then it was put on a train, a funeral train, from Washington through upstate New York, across the upper peninsula, upper part of the state, through Ohio, and down to Springfield, Illinois. 12 days. If he was not embalmed, there's nobody that would have been on that train with him. And that was one of the things that convinced people that embalming was something that they wanted to have done to their loved ones. Next slide. And so, Charles C. Sherman, whose house was just south of, or his house still stands, just south of James Johnson's house on Center Road, was an undertaker and embalmer here in Easton. And like all of us, at some point, he passed away. And so, I don't know if he made use of his own services, but that's his monument in Union Cemetery as the undertaker. Next slide. Deborah Staples Silverman, another person very close to my heart. She, remember who was the second oldest person in Easton, and the oldest man, right? Moses Ogden. She, when he died, was the oldest person in Easton. When she died, she was 107. She lived to be 108. And every year after her centenary, after she turned 100, every year after she turned 100, the newspapers would write a story about her, And the stories were always the same. She was born around where the Hi-Ho is in Fairfield, and moved to Easton when she married Nathaniel Sullivan, who died when she was only 25 years old, and she never remarried. But she had a few children. I think she had 2 children or 3 children, but she never remarried. she never, the story reads she never traveled more than 5 miles, but she did. She would go down to Bridgeport, she'd go down to Fairfield occasionally, and she did apparently she took a trip up to upstate New York to visit somebody, I guess. But she never went on a train. She'd never been on a trolley. And she did ride in a car. Mind you, there weren't a lot of cars, but she didn't ride in a car until 1905. And at first she didn't want to do it, but she came back from the ride and she said she really enjoyed it. It was very exciting. She kept her faculties right up till the end. She could still read the newspaper, which she did religiously. She read the newspaper and the Bible every day, but she was pretty much stone deaf. They had a telephone in her house. This is the Notre Dame Rectory. That's where she died. And in her grandson Frederick's house, Frederick's home. But she couldn't use the phone because she couldn't hear anything. But next slide. So this makes her so cool. Her great uncle was Samuel Staples. That's the Staples part. That's her great uncle. Her third-time great-grandfather was Captain Matthew Sherwood from Sherwood Farms, the guy who settled Sherwood. It was her third-time great-grandfather. And her brother was Horace Staples from Horace Staples High School, or Staples High School in Westport. Anyway, she was born down here in what was called Wilson's Mill, somewhere in one of these houses down here. But there are Staples, Sherwood, and Burr, and that's the house where she died. But this is it. When she was born, the only way to get around on land was by horse or foot. By the time she died, you could take a train, a car, or an airplane. Well, you could fly. You could fly, right? There were veterans of the Revolution who were still in good health when she was born. She knew people who fought in the Revolution. By the time she died, there had been at least four other wars: the 1812, the Civil War, the Mexican War, and the Spanish-American War. The only way to get information from one place to another in 1800 was a letter or a newspaper. When she died, there was a telegraph or telephone. And movies, there were movies. Imagine, there were no pictures back then. When she died, there were moving pictures. She read originally by candlelight or firelight. There were electric lights, light bulbs. The U.S. population was 5 million when she was born, 92 million when she died. There were 16 states, 30 more when she died, 46 states. And she was 7 years old when the Western meteorite landed. I was like, oh my God, she was there, you know? And that's so cool. All right, next slide. And Dead Cemetery. Okay, last one. Or Wheeler Baldwin. Sometimes it's called the Indian Cemetery, which is totally stupid. Next slide, 1800. So it's on the hydraulic line equipment. It's on the one of the signs I found in the woods. I brought it home. It's deep in the woods. You'll figure out where it is if you don't really know where it is, but you can't go there. You need permission. Next slide. This is a really bad aerial view of it, but this is the cemetery here. It's right up against a river. This way, around here. Most of the cemeteries are in places that you didn't want to farm. Like right up against the river is not a great place. And same thing with Aspetuck, and even Union is kind of. All right, so there's about 12 or 15, maybe not even 12 memorials in there. Next slide. Standing memorials. This is another view of it. Next slide. This is the Andrew Perry house, but it was originally Calvin Wheeler's house. This is Black Rock Turnpike. This is Den Road. This is Rock House Road. Used to come all the way through the woods. It actually still does. You can walk through it. It's part of the Centennial Trail. But this is Rock House Road came into Black Rock Turnpike. Calvin and his wife Mary and his daughter Hannah are all buried in Den Cemetery. The interesting thing about Den Cemetery, aside from it being deep in the woods and very small, is that it's an integrated cemetery. It was made as an integrated cemetery. Blacks and whites were buried side by side there. I'm not saying that there were no blacks buried in any of our other cemeteries in the past, go back obviously. Somebody had to bury slaves somewhere, and they probably were buried in a cemetery. But here, these people were had monuments to them. Calvin Wheeler's house, as I said, stood here. This is the foundation. This is the cellar hole. You can still go, you obviously can still go and visit. I took this picture. It's really in great condition. The house was moved 4 miles south to the corner of Westport Road and Black Rock Turnpike, where the Gosses live, if anybody knows the Gosses. That's their house. It was Calvin Wheeler's house. In 1914, it was moved all the way down here. Next slide. So this is the Baldwin family, a black family of basket makers. This is the 1850 census. Sylvanus Baldwin, a large family. His son, William Baldwin, lived right next door, also a basket maker. It was a good job to have. People needed baskets for all sorts of things on farms, and for just everything. So it's a good job to have. This is the well behind Sylvanus's house. This is the cellar hole off of Den Road. Den Road is called that because it led down into the den underneath the Saugatuck River. And at the bottom of Den Road was a foundry and forge. It's called Valley Forge area. This area was known because there were a number of black families that lived here as Little Egypt. We don't know where Sylvanus and his wife Delia are buried, or any of the other people on this list. We do know where his children Aaron and Arity are buried in Den Cemetery. They were both very young, just 12 years old and 10 years old when they died. Next slide. Just down from Sylvanus' house, Daniel Treadwell. Daniel Treadwell had a fairly good-sized farm. The foundations, the cellar hole for his house is really nice too. The Bridgeport Hydraulic Company, when they took over all this land, they either knocked down the houses or they burned them down. There's evidence, clear evidence of burn marks on a lot of the stonework here. Daniel Treadwell's 2 daughters, Peach and Polly, are buried here. They're middle-aged when they passed away. Daniel was also, besides being a farmer, was also a collier. I told you that there was a foundry and forge down at the end of Den Road. The foundry and forge needed charcoal. They needed something. Charcoal burns very hot and very long. And in order to make charcoal, what you do is you go out and you cut down a bunch of trees and you stack them a very special way, and then you cover the whole thing with dirt. You leave a space in the middle, and then you set fire to it. And you let it burn for like a week. It's really hard work, it's really dirty work, and it can be dangerous work. Because if you don't do it right, this whole thing could collapse and you could fall into the middle of it. Or it could not work at all and you just end up with a bunch of burnt wood. And so this is a job that he undertook. I've been up on the hydraulic land and I found that if you look on a LiDAR map, which is it's kind of like radar with light, it shows the details of the ground without buildings and stuff, and without trees. And you look for circles, especially circles around places where there were forges, and I found at least a half a dozen of those circles on the hydraulic land off of Den Road. Probably one of them was his. It's about 20 feet across usually, and probably about 8 or 10 feet high. So it's a big hole, big mound. And then once it had burned out, or you felt it had burned out, you broke it all open, and then you took out the charcoal and delivered it. Excellent. Stephen Thorpe was a pretty wealthy landowner down in this area. He had about 50 acres when he died. He's got a tombstone here. But I did not find his wife's tombstone, which is unusual, because they only died about a month or so apart. And in his probate, it says there's money to be spent to cash paid for funeral expenses of said Thorpe and wife, $47. So I can't imagine that he spent the $47 on just the one tombstone and not one for her. So there may be a tombstone that was stolen or broken beyond repair or is laying underground somewhere. But,
It's at your house.
or it's at my house. I just haven't found it yet. Yeah, so there's that. Next slide. Okay, so here's what we say. We like to say we think we know where the bodies are buried. We know where the bodies are buried on the cemetery committee, but we really just think we know. Over the years, people have done different studies of then cemetery. Marshall Nye did one in 1973. He found, these tombstones that were marked, there's about 10 or 12 people there, and then there's some field stones that he believed were probably markers. Callista Cleary, a high school student at Joe Barlow in 1989, wrote a brilliant report, not only talking about the cemetery, but the Baldwin family, it's a great read. It's available, I believe, online from the Yale University. This is by the way, this is a LiDAR image of the cemeteries. You can see what I mean. I'm talking about, it shows landforms, but no tree, because this is all trees, right? You don't see any trees. In 2007, ground penetrating radar was done that produced this result, believing this is how many graves, possible graves, are located in Ghent Cemetery. Many, many more than the dozen or so that are here. In the intervening 15 or odd years, whatever, almost 20 years, the technology has vastly improved. So Cemetery Committee paid for a new GPR that was done. And that one showed this result inside the cemetery. But the man who did that, and many of you probably were here, you heard him speak. I'm just going to quickly repeat what he said. He actually decided to look outside the walls of the cemetery and found what he believed to be possible graves there. And I tend to believe that that's possible only because the headstones that are here against the wall are right up against the wall here. And it would be very strange. I think the wall came in after people started getting buried at Den. I think at some point somebody said, we need to mark off where the cemetery is. Because it'd be very strange to put a tombstone right up against the wall. I mean, you want to leave a little bit of space. So anyway, that's where we are with that. Next slide. Okay, all right, okay, well, that's an hour, right? On one of the planets. Okay, this is Union Cemetery, and I have, next slide. You have to thank these two people, Ida and Lorraine, for every October there being a lot of police activity at the corner of Stepney Road and Sport Hill. Do I believe in ghosts? Yeah, okay. Have I ever seen one? No. I believe in spirit world, but whatever. And it's funny, just the other day I met a guy I know at work, not at work, but one of our customers came in, and he said he had a friend who was driving past there with his kid in the back seat, and they drove past at night, and the kid said to his dad, "Dad, who's that woman sitting next to you?" Which is a kid saying that, which is like, whoa, that's like, kids and dogs have that, extra telepathy. So, and another guy, after I did one of his dogs, came up to me and told me a whole story about having seen a ghost in his house. So, wherever you go. So, you want a ghost? All right, next slide. I'm going to give you a ghost. All right, I'm going to give you a ghost. I promised one ghost. Next slide. Next slide. There she is. Oh, wait. Oh, that's not a ghost. That's just the sunlight shining through some leaves. Ah, next slide. There we go. We're done. At the risk of being stoned alive, any questions? Sorry I went so long. I just, there's nothing I like better than hearing myself speak. Oh, good question. That's a really good question, and I should have covered that. So, when Fairfield was founded, right, the town in 1639, it didn't take them real long to figure out that there wasn't enough space for all the families. And so they got land going north, and they split that land up into long lots, and in the middle of that, they put a mile of common for everybody to use. And that mile of common had a road running up through the middle of it, which was called Center Road. And so it ran up right through the center of that all these long lots in this thing. And the end of Center Road, which is Reading Road, is Center Street. So that's how it got That's how Center Street Methodist Church got its name too. It was on Center Street, Reading Road. Yeah,
Frank, you mentioned a Beers map. Is
I'm
that
sorry?
a Beers map?
yeah, the 1867 Beers map. Yeah, you can go online and find it. Historic Map Works, I think, has it. And the 56 map, 1856, is the Clark map, which is also really good. It's nice to have both of them because you can like play them off each other. And but what is it? Caveat emptor. Even though you're not going to buy them, they're free. The maps were made, and they're only as good as the people that did the surveying, the people that took the notes, the people that gave the answers, and the people that finally did the cartography, the people that printed them. So there's, and sometimes map makers will take something and put it in the wrong place so that they know that if somebody steals their map, copies their map without doing the legwork, they know, oh, you copied my map because you put this in over here, and that's not what it is. So just keep that in mind when you look at the map. Always cross-reference with census data, which is also a whole other thing. Because the way census worked is people went out and walked the roads, and they went to each house, and they knocked on the door, and if somebody was home, they took their census. And if they didn't, they came back. So while it looks like A, B, C, D, E, it's really A, B, G, C, D, it's like that. That's another thing to keep in mind. Any other questions? Yeah.
So I'm very grateful to findagrave.com because I'm in the 1740 house, and Ebenezer Hubble and Sarah Taylor Thorne Hubble lived in my house, so they're a Union Cemetery.
Okay.
Because of findagrave.com, I found that out.
Yeah.
Do you guys update onto that? Like,
I do not. So there's, like doing research for this, there's stuff I found is wrong. I mean, there's stuff that's wrong. Like wrong genealogy, wrong person. And I so want to do that, but then, that's like a whole rabbit hole. I mean, I'm just like, then I'm going, trying to find, the same thing, it's just, I just don't want to do it. I feel bad, like I should feel bad, because I know better. It's a lot of work.
Luckily, it was right in our face, fortunately.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, they're in the old part.
Okay. Well, and that's, they may not be there too, right? When some of the stones fall over, they don't always end up in, like Betsy Wakeman. Who knows where she is?
Do they have to do wolfstones in Easton? Like the wolfstone, like in the New Haven cemeteries, they have wolfstones because of the wolves.
Oh, I've never heard that.
Yeah.
Wolfstones.
Yeah, like the,
Yeah, I would imagine by this, I don't know, I doubt there are very many wolves left here. You did a pretty good job of denuding the landscape and killing it. There are more deer per square mile here now than there have been in the past 200 years. It's just because, there's probably more coyotes now than there were then. Yes?
You showed like the embalming and caskets and all that. When did cremation become?
Oh, cremation is a big job, right? It takes a lot to burn a body. Although, plenty of other cultures have done it. It requires, we all know the Vikings burning boats and stuff. Although the boats probably just sank in the Bible. But I know that in India the cremation was as a thing. I don't know. To answer your question, I really don't know. I believe probably when the technology was good enough to completely consume a corpse. Although they're never really completely
Because
consumed.
some of the stones you showed had an urn on it.
Urn is a symbol of death.
Oh, it wasn't.
And remembrance, but it doesn't mean that a person was buried in an urn. No, Yes.
Frank, hi. I just want to thank you again for this incredible talk. Round of applause for Frank. Please stay for a bit, ask too many questions. Historical Society folk are here, Bruce here, I'm here, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. Also, there's a 5K this weekend, if you don't know, on Saturday for the Easton Cemetery Committee. If you would like to participate in that, it's great fun. And also, the Easton Cemetery Committee is selling hats outside if you'd like to support the conservation of those funds. Thank you.